So good evening and welcome to this Facebook Live Q&A with Dominic Raab MP. Now, been an incredibly busy time for you, Dom. So what I thought I would do is just let's start with a little intro just to say hi to everybody and tell everyone what you've been up to.
Well, thanks so much. Look, thank you everyone who's joining this. It's great to see you all again. I see you virtually, if you know what I mean. Lots going on. I really appreciate you giving up some time on a Friday evening to hear from me and also to take your questions. I guess three things really. There's the local stuff. We've actually made some progress here in Elmbridge in the Esher Morton constituency. We're starting to see we've turned the curve on cases in terms of the overall number, the rate per 100,000. I've been out talking to businesses before the new set of restrictions were put in place, and they're getting the support that they need, whether it's the business rates relief, the grants, or the bounce back loans. I've been down to Stoke Dagenham, Esher, Walton, Cobham, Midway, talking to businesses and really just trying to listen to them and see the challenges they face. I actually found people more upbeat than I'd expected, I have to say. We've obviously taken a range of measures this week, but one of the things I think which really matters for us locally is the extra support for the self-employed. Something we've been discussing, something I've been hearing a lot about. I'm really pleased that Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, delivered on that. Nationally, obviously, we've got the new restrictions in place. We didn't want to do this. We've done it as a last resort because the localized restrictions weren't getting the virus down. We want to make more progress over the next 4 weeks up until the 2nd of December. That will allow us to go into Christmas, hopefully with the greater flexibility for businesses, which is a particularly sensitive time for them. They need to take advantage of the Christmas period, but also for families and I think our society as a whole. People want to be able to come together. If we make progress now, we'll be in a position to do that. I think it's also important to say we're making good headway on our testing capacity. I'm probably a good example of this because my boys have just been in self-isolation and I've now just gone into self-isolation because I've been in contact with someone who had the symptoms, who tested positive for COVID. I don't have any symptoms, I don't have it. But it's an illustration, a personal illustration of that the system is working. We've got our testing capacity up to 500,000 per day. And what we're looking to do is increase the speed of the turnaround so that we can shift over time in due course to a test and release system, which will really put us in good shape to ease up some of these restrictions. I probably ought to say something about foreign policy and the international scene. Apparently there's an election going on somewhere. We don't have a result yet, but we're watching with interest and it's edging its way towards a conclusion. Paul, I'll hand over to you because I think really the point of these exercises and these evenings is to hear from everyone else.
Yeah, and we have got an astonishing amount of people watching live already. Now, if you are watching this live stream, could I ask you, just so that your friends, family, and members of the community can also benefit from the answers that Dom gives to, because a lot of the questions that will be asked tonight are probably questions on most people's minds. So do hit that share button. And let everybody else benefit from this. Share it to your timeline, and if you belong to any local Facebook groups, share it there as well, please. So, Dom, let's get stuck straight in. First question: why has Elmbridge needed to go into full lockdown when we've been tier 2 for several weeks and our infection rates were going down?
That's right. So, look, first thing I'd say is thanks to everyone who, just knuckled down. None of us wanted to be in tier 2. But we've followed the restrictions. I know I've followed the restrictions. I know how disruptive it is personally and inconvenient, but we've got to do it. We've all got to do our bit. And the reality was, the answer to the question is I've been arguing for the locally tailored approach for so long, and we wanted to make it work. It was just clear in the last 2 weeks that it wasn't going to be enough. And the two bits of data which were interesting in the last 2 weeks were that hospital admissions from COVID had gone up by 90%. The number of people going on to ventilator beds in hospitals had gone up by 65%. So we've tried. We just need this 4-week period where nationally we stop the swirl, the spread, and get the prevalence as well as the R rate down. And I'm confident we can do that. and that will allow us to ease back into localized measures. And look, hopefully Elmbridge has made progress and we'll be in a much better position as a result.
Great, thank you. To the next question. Why does the government keep making U-turns on its COVID policies?
Well, you know what? We follow the virus, and the virus is not doing predictable things. It's a new virus, so in fairness, everyone's learning. I just spoke to the Danish foreign minister, and they've had this problem with minks and the virus in minks trying to transmute and then evolve, and then the risk of that being passed on to humans with a different mutation of the virus. We're all trying to deal with this. And you're right, that there have been changes, there have been shifts. I'm not going to say we haven't, but what we tried to do is respond to the virus based on the scientific advice. If we just said, well, do you know what, we're going to set a plan in place, we thought it through, we're confident in it, and then the facts about the virus, what we learn about the virus, what it does in practice changes, I think the public would be pretty cross with us for being dogmatic about it. We've got to adapt. I know it's challenging for businesses, for families, but I think it's the right approach. It means basically the more adept the more agile and adaptable we can be, the more effective we can be in our response.
Wonderful, thank you very much. So the next question, when will limited companies get help from the government?
Well, we put £200 billion back into the economy to support communities. So a huge amount of that will support all businesses. In terms of limited companies, I mean, look, I've talked to Rishi Sunak about things like the self-employed, obviously the furlough scheme. We've managed to protect a huge number of jobs, something like 12 million through the furlough scheme. I'm very happy to go back, and if whoever's asked that question drops me an email, if there's something that we've missed that we need to deal with, I'm very happy to take that back to the Chancellor and the Treasury. We're trying to really target the economic support. There's not a bottomless pit of money. Everyone knows that. Certainly, as a Conservative, I'm very conscious of that. But this is an unprecedented response. The IMF, just to give you a sense, said that we were global leaders in the economic response. But if there's something we've missed, drop me an email and I'll take it up on your behalf.
Great, thank you. Now, if you've just joined this live stream with Dom Raab, please make sure that you share this to your own timeline and to any local Facebook groups that you belong to, so everybody can benefit from the answers that Dom's giving. Now, on to a local question. Could you please give me an update on Esher Road scheme with the cycling lanes? Could you please advise what Surrey County Council are going to do?
Well, there is a big push. I spoke to Tim Oliver, who's the leader of Surrey County Council earlier. We had a good catch up on a whole range of local issues, and the cycle lane, the pressing out, the rolling out of it is really important. Obviously, with COVID, there's been limits on what people can do, and if there's an area particular to you that you feel you want more done, or you're not sure about the way it's being done, drop me an email again. Let me take it up with Tim. But I think it's really important. I think it's important. We want to get more people off the roads. I think it's important for people's health and fitness, but obviously environmentally it has a big impact. So I'm a big supporter of it. And again, if there's any particular aspect that you want me to look into, I'm really happy to do it.
Great, thank you very much. Now, the next question is something that I think everybody wants to know. When is a vaccine going to be ready?
Well, there's lots of progress being made. I think we're all a bit reticent about, saying with any, certainty when it will be ready. But I know that the trials have been going well. We're also, as the UK, well plugged in if the vaccine is developed elsewhere, not at Imperial or Oxford, to make sure we can get the vaccine for the British people. When do I think? Look, I don't think it'll be this side of Christmas, but I think in the first half of next year, and there's a good chance that we'll be able to see a vaccine in place. And of course, a vaccine's a game changer for the virus, but there are other things that will be game changing as well. I think the quicker turnaround for tests, I think, could be a real game changer. And also therapeutics has already shifted the dynamic a little bit, and it can go further by reducing the fatality rate for those that get it and end up in hospital.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the next question is, why are you not using Nightingale hospitals for COVID patients leaving the hospitals free to go on with their other business?
It's just not quite as easy as that. I mean, there's a simplicity which I understand, and indeed I've asked the question before. But you've got to bear in mind all of the support staff that's required. You've got to bear in mind the logistics that are involved, the expertise you need on hand. So the Nightingales are there. They're providing the capacity if we need it, the surplus capacity. But the reality is, one of the things that we've actually done pretty effectively during this crisis is make sure the NHS is able to deal with the COVID patients, but also the non-COVID patients. We're very keen to be clear that the non-COVID challenges, whether it's surgery, whether it's cancer checkups, whatever it may be, will continue, and those services will continue to be run. It's quite important. I don't really buy this dislocation of the COVID threat to the non-COVID health threats, to the economic and social threats. I think they're all intertwined. So we've got to make sure we've got an NHS that's integrated and that's able to deal with both sides.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, if you've just joined this live stream, could I ask you, if you want to ask Dom a question, put it in the comments and we'll do our very best to get that read out to Dom for him to answer. Now, the next question is, and you kind of alluded to this at the beginning, how are you feeling? Here you're in isolation after a contact with COVID.
Do you know, I'm fine. It's just frustrating. So the way it works is if you're in contact with, I mean, you probably know this, but if you haven't been contacted, if you're in contact with someone and you get either contacted by the NHS Test and Trace or another body, there's a series of steps you go through, but basically you self-isolate for 14 days from the relevant point in time. So I'll be back to work Wednesday week. It's a bit frustrating, but look, people are going through a lot worse, and we've all got to do our bit. And I do think it's important just to follow the rules. And when they apply to you, you know, I just think it's a moment to step up. There's so many people making other sacrifices. I'm lucky I've got a bit of support around me. So we just take it. You know, I take the rough with the smooth. We'll make it work. Obviously, there's lots going on internationally and locally. So I always slightly restless that I can't be as effective as possible, which you can't be when you're entirely working from home. But look, we'll use all the remote working, and I've got a good support structure, so I'll still continue to crack on from home.
Okay, great. Now the next question, I'm just going to ask our event facilitators just to check the next question about the Moseley library, because I don't fully understand the question. I think there's a few typos in there. So if you could give me that again, please, so that we can get that read out. The next question is, will the government and the Treasury address the gaps in support and offer financial help to the 3 million people who have been left with no financial help?
Well, as I said, the £200 billion package that's been provided, and most recently covering self-employed, one of those areas people were concerned about, felt there'd been gaps, particularly locally in this constituency. I think it's been unprecedented. The International Monetary Fund said it's global. We've been global leaders. The challenge is there's no doubt we can't help everyone to the maximum that we would otherwise want. That we've got to make sure we pay for it. We've got to be responsible with public finances. There's huge pressures on it. But I think this has been an unprecedented level of support, both historically in this country, but also internationally. And as I said, the IMF backs that up. Obviously, if there's anyone out there that's really struggling, or drop me a line and I'll see what I can do.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Will the government and the Treasury address the gaps in the support and offer financial help to 3 million people who have been left with no financial help? That's what I've just asked. Do beg your pardon, Dom. The next question is, what's happening with Denmark and flights around the world, bearing in mind that the mink situ, should they stop?
Yeah, we just imposed those restrictions. Actually, I spoke to my Danish opposite number earlier today, and for those that are not familiar, what we're worried about is that there's a variation of COVID that's appeared in minks, and we're worried about them then passing on a mutated version of the virus to humans, and then all the risk is that the vaccine that we're working on to deal with the COVID virus doesn't work because it doesn't capture this new variation. It shows you how challenging it is. I mean, they're basically culling the entire mink population of Denmark. You think of the jobs that will be affected by that. So yes, we'll make sure that we've got the right measures in place. And I had a good conversation with my Danish opposite number. We're very close with the Danes, and of course we've got to take those measures. And he understood that.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Will you tackle street crime? There is a complete lack of respect for our police force. I hear that a lot.
The police done an amazing job, and this has been a really tough set of conditions for them to police. I think you know, the media always pick up on this or that case, but overwhelmingly, I think they've done a very sensitive and clear job when the parameters I think were very difficult. I think we just back our police 110%. The penalties are in there as a last resort. That's you know, for the measures we're taking to beat this virus, we've all got to club together. It's got to be a team effort. It's got to be a national effort. But the police are there for people that wantonly break the rules. And of course, COVID has affected their capacity and their ability to operate as well. So I fully support them.
Okay, thank you very much. Why did our government provide free school meals to children during the half-term holidays? Why didn't they provide free school meals is the question.
Well, the schools are back up and running, and free school meals are basically a measure across the board for schools when they're running. They're also, I mean, they're important, and I pay respect to Marcus Rashford for his campaign, but they're not the most targeted way of dealing with the most vulnerable, which is why we put our money into the local authorities and to target it more directly at the most vulnerable. And I think it's very clear when you look at it that there's the politics of this, and there's the heart and soul and the impassioned pleas. But if you look at what will get the resource to those that need it most, and those that are from the most deprived backgrounds or the most difficult conditions, a more targeted approach is, in my view, certainly the right way to go.
Great, thank you very much. Now, if you've just joined this live stream with Dom Raab, please, could I ask you to share this to your Facebook and to any local Facebook groups that you belong to, so that the whole community can benefit from the answers that Dom gives. And if you have any questions yourself, pop them in the comments and we'll try and get them answered for you. So the next question is, are you ever going to get Walton into the Transport for London zone?
Well, we're not in London, so no, I don't think we are.
Right. Okay.
London, Transport for London are not. I know why people want it because of the discounts, but no, London is not going to keep exponentially creeping out into the burbs. It's just not going to do it. But I mean, I was actually down at Walton Station with the managing director of South Western Trains last Friday. And we were looking at the improvements that are being made, the footbridge that is planned. There's a whole overhaul of the franchising system. I'm very conscious of the challenge for our commuters. I want us to get better value for money from fares, better punctuality of services, and less overcrowding. I think we're on track to deliver that. I know it's been a long haul, but I don't think we're going to see TfL creep out and offer those deals that it offers within London outside of its geographic boundaries.
Okay, so the next question. Hello, Mr. Raab. I'm in Thames Ditton, where you yourself live. Well over 1,300 people have now signed the Stop Wrecking Thames Ditton petition. As our local MP, will you therefore now please join our campaign to save Thames Ditton and nearby places in your constituency from disastrous overdevelopment destruction?
Well, look, what I'd say is go and hold your local borough councillors to account. The reality is that people ask about two things. They ask about Greenbelt and housing numbers. If this local authority, which is run by the Lib Dems and the residents' associations, who in Thames Ditton represent our community, if they had a local plan in place, they've been in office for 3 of the last 4 years, there would be no question about our housing numbers. There would be no question of their increase. I've spoken to Rob Jenrick. I'm doing everything I can to avoid any increase. I understand the concerns, but hold all of us to account. Hold your local council to account. It is not a Conservative council. We wouldn't be in this position if there was, because we'd have a local plan in place. So the only reason this question even arises is because we've been exposed to this, because the local authority doesn't have a plan in place. The second issue is the Greenbelt. There's been a local consultation, again by the residents' associations and the Lib Dems, and they've left open the opportunity for a local plan to include Greenbelt development. The local Conservative councillors opposed that. When I was housing minister, secured in the new National Planning Policy Framework extra restrictions against greenbelt development. The only reason this is even in question is because it hasn't been ruled out by the Lib Dems and the Residents Association. Feel free to hold me to account, but please, please, you're a Thames Ditton resident, hold your local Thames Ditton Residents Association councillors to account.
Thank you very much. So this is a question now on your portfolio, your government minister portfolio. So how much are British government, how are the British government pushing American counterparts on the Dunn family fight for justice?
Well, look, we made it very clear. We think there's a denial of justice. I'm on the side of the Dunn family. The CPS run have put in charges. The Home Office have put in an extradition request. We obviously can't force the US to comply, but we've made it very clear. I changed the arrangements which previously applied to the diplomatic immunity, so a case like this could never happen again. And we've made it clear we will support the Dunn family, and I would personally, with an amicus curiae brief, which is a friend of the court brief, if they want to bring civil litigation in the US. We're doing everything we can, and I've made that clear to Tim and Charlotte, Harry Dunn's parents. I've also been very clear, as has the Prime Minister with President Trump.
Okay, thank you very much. What about the slum boats and the land grabbing along the Thames bank towards Walton?
Well, look, as for illegally moored boats, I'm calling on the local authority, which isn't run by the Conservatives, just so we're clear, to introduce a public space protection order. It seems to me that given the challenges they've had with law enforcement riverside, both in Walton and in Molesey, that is the way to effectively deal with illegally moored boats. It's clear that measure would work. I don't really understand. I've heard the reasons. I've written a number of times to Stuart Sellican, to the local authority. I've got some respect for them. I've got a good working relationship. I don't understand why this measure, which would deal with the problem, hasn't been taken.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, if you've just joined this live stream with Dom Raab, if you have any questions at all, get them in the comments there, and we will get them read out for Dom to answer. So the next question: why can I go for a walk with my partner, but I can't play golf with him? What's the difference?
Well, look, I know it's difficult, and people always feel that there are artificial distinctions being drawn. What we're trying to avoid is opening up clubs, because when you open up clubs, you get all the social milling around together, the social mixing, and that's the key to it. So you can go and get as much exercise you like. The limits that were previously on in lockdowns don't apply. You can do it with anyone in your family. You can do it with one member of another household. But what we're not doing is opening up clubs, because even though you might be able to walk perfectly socially distanced without any mixing, it's at the clubs and the clubhouses that the risk comes. So I know it's difficult, hopefully only in place for the 4 weeks of this new set of restrictions. And I know people will say, you know, why draw the line here or why draw the line there? When we talk to the scientists, they'll say, we've got to draw the line somewhere. And that's what we've done.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask the next question if nobody else did. What do you think of your Karate Dom spitting image puppet?
It could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot worse. I loved spitting image growing up, and I chuckled.
Great, thank you very much. When will the House of Lords reform be introduced, as the unelected House is undemocratic and unrepresentative of modern Britain, and how would you reform the Lords?
Yeah, really good question. Look, it's not on the agenda right now. We've got a lot of other priorities. I've always made clear when we had the vote before that I was in favour of Lords reform. I do think when I look at my children, I think about our grandchildren, they'll ask why, you know, how do we allow an unelected second chamber? Equally, they do quite a lot of good technical scrutiny work. And I think we need to be quite careful that we replace it with something better. I think the various suggestions to basically set up a competing chamber with democratically elected representatives that compete with the House of Commons, I think will be a recipe for muddle and chaos. So I certainly don't support that. But I've long supported it, reform, and I voted for it when we had the chance.
Okay, great. What are you doing to stop Walton Town Centre from dying? Businesses are leaving and the spaces are not being filled?
Look, it's a real challenge, particularly right now. I was in Walton High Street. I've been down to Midway. I've been in the heart, talking to businesses. Obviously, COVID has walloped them. We're providing the support that we can. On top of that, you've got the online competition from the Amazons of this world. I think what we need to do is to, I mean, as consumers, cherish and use and spend our money in our town centres. I think they'll need to adapt. The patterns of consumer spending have just changed. That's because we're buying online in ways that we didn't before. But I think if we're smart, they're smart, and the government supports them, there's a transition which can lead to a better place. Of course, where businesses do close down, there's an opportunity to build homes which we need in this constituency without doing it on Greenbelt. So let's think about it in a smart way.
Okay, thank you. So the recent planning reforms consultation promote new housing calculation, which would see Elmbridge's dwellings per annum rise from 623 to 774. Elmbridge Borough Council are struggling to meet the 623 in their local plan, let alone another hike. Do you support these proposals from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government?
Well, first of all, it's a consultation. No, I've made clear as a constituency MP, I've written into the consultation, I've made clear that given the physical geographic limits on Elmbridge, I don't think that that's right. I've spoken to Rob Jenrick, I've spoken to MHCLG, and indeed I spoke to Elmbridge Borough Council and said, I agree with you on this. The truth is, though, we would not be subject even to the consultation on this if the local authority had a plan in place. So the Lib Dems and the Residents Association, they can still safeguard this. If they get a plan in place, within 6 months of the government's response to this consultation, any new numbers wouldn't even conceivably apply to us here. So this is something that we can do something about locally, but the local council, inexplicably in my view, have been so slow to deal with this that we're exposed in a way that we just shouldn't be. So I'm doing my bit at the national level to defend the line, but we've got, frankly, I think, a whole lot of inertia amongst the Lib Dems and the Residents Association, who for 3 of the last 4 years have been sitting on their hands with this.
Okay, great, thank you very much. There is a marker stone by Moseley Library that marks where East Moseley ends and West Moseley starts. For some reason, the post office has moved this. Can it go back to where it was?
I'm happy to look at this, but the boundaries changed some time ago, and of course this has been an ongoing issue. I know Steve Bax, who's one of our Moseley councillors and campaigners, has been looking at this, and I'm very happy to work with him and see what can be done. It's within the art of the possible.
Okay, great. So next question: what are his objectives and plans in terms? So what are your objectives and plans in terms of working with the government in assisting and supporting people with mental health during such a strange time?
Oh, it's really difficult. I think a lot of people who've never had any mental health problems, I've never myself, really appreciate with the lockdown, the impacts on families, particularly if you don't have a garden or, you're in a flat and with children. We also understand the challenge for the elderly. One of the things that really struck me when I was volunteering in the previous lockdown was just the mental fatigue and weariness of those people who we were delivering medicines and food parcels to, particularly the elderly. I think the local charities are doing a great job. Local volunteers, they often have the contacts that reach in. I think the local NHS are doing a brilliant job. And the truth is, what we've got to do is get through the next 3 or 4 weeks, get out the other side. And if we take the measures now, we can all help with the discipline about following the rules now, we're in a much better position to come out the other side and be able to ease up. And that's the way I think people will be able to get more social contact, which is what they need.
Great, thank you, Dom. Another foreign affairs question. Will Britain allow Hong Kongers born before 1997 to register British national overseas status? Some of their parents did not apply for them before the handover.
Yeah, look, listen, there's a transitional issue there we're well aware of. I spoke to the Home Secretary about this. She's dealing with it. So the offer we make will be include those who otherwise would be missed off. But great question, and thank you for asking it.
Okay, thank you. What are your feelings on the Elmbridge local plan being delayed yet again?
Well, it comes back to the question I'm getting asked this all the time. Why is the Greenbelt exposed? Why are we exposed to potentially higher numbers? It's because the local authority, which is not run by the Conservatives, it's run by the Lib Dems and the Residents Association, have had the time, they've still got the time to get a plan in place. If they do it, and I appreciate there are COVID restrictions on the council, I think the officers have done a great job there in tough conditions. But frankly, if the council get its act together, we're not exposed. And I would have thought that they would want to do that. And frankly, I think it's been pretty lethargic, bordering on incompetence, that they haven't.
Okay, thank you. If our dividends aren't recognised as salary for furlough support, how can they be recognised as salary for tax?
Good question. I don't know. Drop me a line and I'll take it up on your behalf. I'm sorry. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, we'll put your email address in the comments for that person to get
my parliamentary email, please.
Parliamentary, yep, no problem at all. Okay, and how long will we have to wait to get testing done at airports?
But we're looking at it. It's not quite as straightforward because the people can walk through an airport and be asymptomatic and not have the virus, and then get it later. We'd need to test not just in airports but a period afterwards. So it wouldn't entirely solve the need for quarantine when you come to the UK. But the crucial thing is if we can speed up the turnaround of the test, particularly if you could do a 2-hour test, then we could do what's called test and release. So there's a huge amount of work going on to achieve that. It's a great question. We want to do it. It's not that this has been ignored. But the challenge is that people can walk through and not test positive, but then still have the virus and test positive later. That's the challenge.
Okay, wonderful. What is the main foreign policy focus for the United Kingdom at this moment in time, please?
Oh, I think there's a whole range of things. There's not one thing. We're looking at the relationship with the Indo-Pacific region, huge economic opportunities there. We're promoting open societies, whether it's Hong Kong and trying to protect their freedoms. We've got a media freedom campaign I teamed up with the Canadians on. We're promoting public goods, whether it's trying to protect the environment. The UK goes into next year hosting the climate change talks, the UN climate change talks, and obviously COVID. We're working with our partners around the world to make sure not only we can get a vaccine, but we can ensure equitable access to it, which I think is important for Brits here at home. But also we want to make sure that we shore up the more vulnerable countries abroad so that we don't get a global second wave sweeping through that no one would be immune from.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. And if you've just joined this live stream with Dominic Raab, could I ask you to please share this to your timeline and to any local Facebook groups so that the rest of the community can benefit from Dom's answers. And if you have a question yourself, just pop them in the comments there and we'll do our best to get them answered. So the next question, as schools are open during this lockdown, do you not think that the schools became the next hotbed of infection?
Well, it's not what the chief medical officer says. He thinks that the risk of transmission via schools is very low. And the reality is we've got to balance these risks, but we've just been really clear, we've got to keep the schools open. I think it's important for parents that work. I think it's important for children. And I also think it's important for the most vulnerable children because they need that exposure, they need that care. And I think the schools in Elmbridge have done just a fantastic job. I really pay tribute to them. I know it's not been straightforward, but we do need our kids at school. And one of the differences between this and the last lockdown is that we're not taking that measure, and I think that's absolutely the right way to go.
Okay, thank you very much. The government has made clear that support groups for new parents, such as breastfeeding support for mothers, can continue during the new national lockdown. How can we ensure that venues such as children's centres or community halls actually stay open to allow these essential activities to take place?
Well, look, all I'd say is drop me a line. Let me see if I can go into bat if there's a service that you can't access that you need. I know what it's like. I remember antenatal classes and the challenges for for new families with children that are newborn, for new mums and dads. Look, if you've got a challenge with that, drop me a line and I'll see what I can do.
Okay, and I want to know the answer to this next question. What's your view on Donald Trump's behaviour over the last few days?
We're not yet at a point where there's a result in the election. I'm just being really careful. Forgive me, as Foreign Secretary, I think it's right not to get embroiled in the campaign or indeed the aftermath of the campaign. One thing I would say is, though, I think it's edging its way to a definitive result. And I've just got full faith in the American system because the checks and balances are in place. People want to appeal this or that, they can. And eventually the college system declares a result. And I'm confident it will do so. So they'll get there. But just as we don't particularly want foreign politicians intervening in our elections very much, and people criticise that when it happens, I want to do them the courtesy of not sort of dipping my toe in those waters.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question, I think this might be a bit controversial. Who do you think is the better football manager, Jurgen Klopp or Pep Guardiola?
Frank Lampard. I'm a Chelsea fan. I like both of them, I have to say, though. I like them. Do you know what? Funnily enough, you know, you think of the loutish behaviour. My dad used to take me to Chelsea in the 80s, and we had all the hooliganism. The barriers went up, and he stopped taking me. And you think of the transition football's gone through, and the manager's the same. But now I think you've got in Guardiola and Klopp, you've got two managers who handle themselves not just, you know, obviously brilliant managers, great acumen. They handle themselves as professionals and with integrity, and I think as role models. So I like them both. Probably if you pushed me, I quite like Guardiola.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, can the government please sort out tracking the virus with fast test results? Do you think that this will help?
Massively will help. The turnaround of tests is really important. We're making progress. It is potentially one of those game changers. There are three game changers: a vaccine, the therapeutics, because they reduce the fatality rate, and quick turnaround tests. So you can test on a daily basis whether people have got it, or and that will help release people either from isolation, which I know what that's like, but also from people traveling in. So I think that could make a real difference, and we're on it. We're really striving and putting our shoulder to the wheel to try and get that in place.
Okay, thank you. Why is Test, Track and Trace being run by a private company?
Well, it's not, but we did bring Dido Harding in, so that with a real challenging project to manage, we thought it was good to have someone who's got some experience in the private sector of doing it. But it's not being run by a private company. Having said that, I don't think during this crisis we should be dogmatic about it. The government has got a hell of a job to do. When the army wants to pitch in, we say, of course, or I say want to pitch in when we need them to pitch in, we take advantage of it. When local authorities, who I think also in very difficult circumstances, generally done a good job, it's a team effort. The voluntary sector have, and I think businesses have got their role to play. So I wouldn't be snippy about businesses getting involved. Obviously, that's not in terms of running patient care so much, but in terms of project management, bringing in someone like Dido Harding with that professional entrepreneurial experience, I think it's probably quite a good thing.
Okay, thank you. Portfolio Q is the publication date of the integrated review expected before Christmas. Can you please provide some guidance on the publication date?
Well, we've moved to a 1-year spending review, and so we're adjusting our plans because the idea was that we have the 3-year spending review in line with the integrated strategic review. I'm confident we'll be saying more on this before Christmas. We've done a huge amount of work. I chaired the ministerial team, or the ministerial group, I should say, that have been looking at this, feeding into the Prime Minister and to the officials. Huge amount of work's been done. We just need to make sure we synchronise it properly.
Okay, great. And what does Dominic think of Jeremy Corbyn's suspension?
Look, my father was a Holocaust refugee. I'm just disgusted by the anti-Semitism that we've seen in the Labour Party. I know most Labour members are, in fairness, and most Labour volunteers, activists, as well as MPs. And I think Keir Starmer did the right thing. I think the only thing I would say is Keir Starmer was backing him week in, week out, month in, month out, and indeed at the last election was suggesting he was a fit and proper person to be Prime Minister. So I think it galls a little bit, and I'm not sure. I think there's a credibility gap with what Keir Starmer's done now, perhaps for political reasons, with the position that he took when he was a member of that shadow cabinet for so long.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. So, if another lockdown is required but does not get through the House of Commons, would it be a good idea to have an advisory lockdown? Let the public decide if they wish to remain at home. If not, let them go out to work, and reach an understanding with businesses and local councils to let people isolate if they wish to or not.
Well, if you look at the measures we've had to take now, we've taken a targeted approach. It only took us so far. We've needed to have this 4-week, more intensive national set of restrictions. That's to get control of the virus. If we just said that adhering to the rules was voluntary, we would not get a grip on the virus. And it's very clear what would happen. The virus would go into exponential rise. That would cause thousands more deaths than we need. We'd end up then with the damage to the economy that would yield. We'd almost certainly end up in a national lockdown sooner or later, because people would feel that we weren't taking decisive enough action to prevent deaths. So I think we are taking the right approach. I know it's been tiring, physically, mentally, emotionally. I know we're all weary with it. I get it. I'm not looking forward to being at home for another week, self-isolating here, although I'm glad that my kids were self-isolating for 10 days. I'm glad at least they're going back to school. So I do understand the weariness with it, but just having a voluntary approach would not allow us to tackle the virus. So I don't think that's the right way to go.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we still have got quite a lot of questions to get through, and about just over 15 minutes to go. So let's see if we can rattle through these, Dom. Who is your political, non-political idol or hero?
Political or non-political?
Whatever. So yeah, whatever you like.
So I have the two people up in my office, the two pictures I have, Mother Teresa and Muhammad Ali. And I think they were both great fighters in their own way.
Fair enough, thank you. Is reforming local government on the government's agenda?
Yeah, and there's a whole debate about unitary authorities nationally and of course locally. I'm a supporter of it in principle. I think it's a good move. I think it delivers more effective services for residents and reduces their council tax. So it's very much on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. What happened to the off-the-shelf deal we were supposed to have with the EU?
Well, any deal requires both sides to come to the agreement. We've obviously had the EU on fisheries and the level playing field, the regulatory commitments, basically want to treat us as if we haven't left the EU. And I think that, we boiled it down to those two issues. We're making progress. I'm still reasonably confident that there's a deal to be done, but it needs to be done on both sides. And if the EU show the flexibility, the pragmatism I think we've showed, I think there is a deal still to be done.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Raab, are there any current governments you are in contact with regarding further air corridors to protect the UK aviation sector?
I speak to my opposite numbers all the time. I spoke to my Danish colleague today. I spoke to others earlier in the week. We're doing as much as we can. But the truth is, with the air corridors, we're driven by the risk. What we don't want to do, particularly given that we're in a new set of restrictions, which people are bristling against and would rather avoid, of course we don't want to add to that pressure as we try and get the virus down. We don't want to risk it going up because people coming in with the virus from overseas. So I think the approach we're taking, guided by Public Health England and the Chief Medical Officer and the Joint Biosecurity Centre, is the right one.
Okay, thank you very much. Why should we compromise our food standards to do trade deals with the US?
We shouldn't and we won't. And the Prime Minister and the Trade Secretary have made that absolutely clear.
Thank you. Would it be wise to bulk up the Navy or Border Force to patrol the seas against other nations illegally fishing in our waters and our vulnerable refugees crossing the channel?
Well, we have a huge amount of capability there, but obviously it's a very unpredictable scenario. I mean, obviously, if we if we get a deal with the EU, which is by far my preference, I think we'll be in a good position in relation to fisheries. If not, yes, enforcement will be really important. We've got to be able to enforce our coastal waters, an independent coastal state. And I know, talking to the Home Secretary, that we are bearing down on the number of illegal migrants trying to get over from France. That's through law enforcement measures, cooperation with the French, and trying to deal with the problem at source in the countries from which these poor people are departing from, and dealing with and tackling the gangs that try and profit from their misery.
Okay, thank you. Will the government help the aviation industry?
As I said, we put £200 billion in to the economy as a whole. We're looking at all the individual sectors, and I know that the Chancellor is very conscious of the aviation sector. When we did the repatriation effort during the first wave, we put £75 million into charter flights. So that was an element of financial support for them at a difficult time, albeit for running those services. And we're doing as much as we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Why is there a special committee discussing mandatory vaccines, and why are we getting a mandatory vaccine?
I haven't heard that discussed, but I would think that most people will want to get a vaccine, because otherwise, if you haven't had the vaccine, you may end up being subject to the kind of restrictions that we're going through now. So I would have thought that's just something we want to roll out and encourage people to have. I haven't heard it being discussed, I have to say, as a mandatory measure.
Okay, thank you. What is happening with regard to Nazanin, please?
Well, the positive news this week is that she wasn't returned to prison. We made it very clear that was a game changer in the discussions and that we're having with Iranians on a number of fronts. The arbitrary detention of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, but also the other UK Iranian dual nationals, is absolutely unwarranted and unjustified. I'm speaking to Foreign Minister Zarif, our ambassador is speaking to the Iranian authorities. We're looking to see how we can facilitate their release. Obviously, we can't force them to do it, but we're taking every measure that we can. We're leaving no stone unturned, and I want to get Nazanin back to her husband Richard and her daughter Gabriella. Okay,
thank you very much. Mr. Raab, given that we know the PCR test is only accurate in 7% of cases, and we know the SAGE data is flawed with flu and COVID amalgamated together, do you not think it was corrupt to lock down the country, especially without a lockdown assessment?
There's about 3 different assumptions there that are just not correct. It's right to say that there's at any one point in time, a test can't guarantee anyone won't have the virus or get the virus because of the incubation period. It's not true to say that we went into this lockdown or this extra set of national restrictions without an analysis. We did concerted analysis. We analyse all the time. The OBR does it independently as well. But we do need to be able to take the measures in an agile and adept way and respond to upticks in the virus. So the reason, as I said, that we went from the local approach to a national approach was the 2-week data that showed a 90% increase in hospital admissions, a 65% increase in those on ventilator beds. So we're constantly following both the science and tracking the economic implications.
Okay, thank you very much. Particularly in Walton, there is a significant amount of retirement development. What support measures are you implementing to help young people get on the property ladder sustainably?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, look, we've got an ageing population, so it's unsurprising that there are retirement homes in Surrey and in Elmbridge. But it is really important that we can do what we can to support young buyers. We've cut stamp duty, the support for affordable housing as well, and we need to build more. So whilst because building helps over time bring the price down and stop the escalating house prices. And whilst I'm against greenbelt development, I do think we need to build more homes in Elmbridge. I think we need to build them for young people, for our key workers in the public sector, and for those on lower middle incomes. We don't want this to be a community where those who serve us can't live. I think that would be unhealthy. So, and we don't want it to be a place which is is not able to provide homes for young people. So we need to do more, and it's a team effort, both with the local authority but also the government.
Okay, now we've got about 10 minutes to go, and in the best will in the world, I don't think we're going to answer all the questions we've got. I've got 41 more here. I do know that we've got another Facebook Live being teed up for very soon. So we'll try our best to get as many of these answered before we...
Snappy answers, I understand.
Yeah, thank you. What is your stance on China, specifically how to deal with relationships with Chinese government?
I think we need to take advantage of the positives in the relationship. China is going to be important economically for us and for the world. Its size, it speaks for itself. China also on things like climate change is very important, the biggest net emitter of emissions, but also the biggest investor in renewables. They've just announced a new emissions target, so they that's quite important. Let's recognise that. Equally, whether it's intellectual property theft, the treatment of Hong Kong, or other threats to the UK, we will be absolutely robust in defending our interests, and I think that's the calibrated approach that we should take.
Thank you. What does Dominic think of Islamophobia in the Tory party?
Look, I have got zero tolerance for it. We've introduced a review to make sure that if there's lessons that we can learn in terms of disciplining those that engage in it, it is learned. And I can say right the way through to my job as Foreign Secretary, we're leading an alliance for freedom of religious belief, which includes not just Christians and Jews and Hindus and Sikhs, but also Muslims around the world. So I think it's really important.
Thank you. Given the squeeze on professional services job market due to the pandemic and Brexit, has the government given any thought to providing support to help the unemployed to becoming self-employed?
We are looking at things like retraining and reskilling, and that's probably part of that. I'd need to look at what specific measures will be in place, and if the individual, the gentleman or the lady drops me a line, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Would you say by declining the NHS a pay rise and free school meals is having the nation's best interests at heart?
Well, I think targeting the most vulnerable children and families is the right thing to do. The issue with free school meals has never been, do we want to look after those children from deprived families and communities? It's what's the best way to do it. And nurses have had a pay rise, and so that's not true. And of course, there are independent pay review bodies for all our brilliant public sector servants. And we've said that after this, we need to think about how we repay and pay tribute and recognise even further those on the front line, whether in the NHS or elsewhere.
Okay, thank you very much. We didn't have a money tree, but now we've got the bloody rainforest. Where has all this money come from?
Well, look, we're going to end up having to, in terms of the measures we've taken, we're going to have to get the economy back up and running. The biggest challenge with any deficit or public finances is the economy, is the engine that delivers the business growth, the job growth that creates the taxes. That's where it comes from. It doesn't come from a magic tree. It comes from businesses and individuals and their hard work. So the number one thing to tackling the public finance challenge we have, and it's going to be big and severe, is getting the economy back up and running. And of course, we can't do that until we've tackled this virus.
Okay, thank you. Will we get more police in Malsey to stop crime?
We've already got more police in Surrey, and that will mean we'll have an allocation of that into Elmbridge, and that will be distributed across the different wards. I'm talking to Bert Dean, as well as the Chief Constable, about the best way to do that. In fact, I was due to be out this Friday, so today, with the local police, having a tour, which I sometimes do as the local MP, either by car or on patrol. And we've had to reschedule it for the moment, but I'll certainly take up the question of the gentleman, the resident from Molesey raised.
Okay, great. And are you having surgery meetings soon?
Well, we can't at the moment, but I've had surgeries recently in the last few weeks. And the minute we're in a position to do it, I'll get back up and running. But I'm still turning over the emails, the letters. So if anyone's got a problem, please do drop me a line.
Okay, thank you. When will local councils be fully reimbursed by the government for all the extra money they have had to spend to deal with COVID-19?
They've had a huge amount of financial support. Obviously, when we come to the 1-year spending review that the Chancellor does, we'll look at it again. But local authorities have had the support to do the great job that, by and large, they've done.
Okay, thank you. Will you look into supporting the UK space industry, collaborating with NASA for the Artemis Moon programme, so British scientists can participate? I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but anyway.
I don't know about the details of it, but one of the things we're looking about with this integrated review, which is the Britain's foreign policy, but bringing everything in from the economic development to the military to the aid contribution, is science and tech is at the heart of it. And one of the key elements of that, which we're already looking at, is how we expand and deepen our space collaborations in the tech sphere. So it sounds like a great opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. What are you actually doing to help young people on the housing ladder? I think we've asked this already, but take note, removing stamp duty inflates house prices and first-time buyers wouldn't buy it anyway.
Well, I don't think that's quite correct. If you look at the stamp duty cuts that we put in place, we know that there are people getting access to the housing ladder that wouldn't have otherwise been in a position to do so. It did have an effect on demand. We've got a whole range of schemes for helping young people to get onto the housing ladder. They're under review at the moment because things like Help to Buy will come to an end eventually. And it's right to say that to ask the question whether that has inflated house prices or gone to people who are concerned about it going to the pay packets of developers and banks. But we've had a suite of measures. But the number one thing we can do to help people get on the housing ladder, young people and others, is to build the houses we need. Otherwise, the demand is competing for too circumscribed and too limited an amount of supply of houses.
Okay, thank you. Can we focus the remaining time for a trade deal on manufacturing and services rather than arguing about fishing?
Well, the fishing, it's all, you don't get a deal until you've got the whole deal. The only thing that is left to talk about is the level playing field and fisheries. And whilst I agree that it's a small proportion of our overall economy in terms of GDP, I think there's a point of principle here, which is that the EU are basically saying that having seen the UK fishing industry pretty much decimated by EU rules, they can't think that we'd stick to those rules as we leave the EU. We'd want to be, we'd expect to be, we will be, we are an independent coastal state. And I think we should exercise the rights, including over our coastal waters and our fisheries, that every independent coastal state would do. Can't really see how that, as a matter of basic principle, is something we could give up.
Okay. Why have the events industry been completely ignored?
I don't think they have been completely ignored, but they have been disproportionately hit. And so, one of the reasons we want to get through this 4-week period, get into Christmas, is because we understand that Christmas and that seasonal time of year is really important for the events management industry.
Okay, very quickly, what do the UK government think of the current conflict of Ethiopia? And then I'm going to ask you one more question after that, and then we're wrapping up.
Well, look, I'm worried about it. There's an ethnic tint to it. I was supposed to be in Ethiopia this week, but we cancelled it because of the new restrictions coming in place. And I used to be here in the UK, but I am worried about it, and I'll be speaking to the Ethiopian Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister soon.
Okay, and final question. What happens if we don't get a vaccine?
Well, there are 3 basic ways that we can shift the dial. A vaccine isn't guaranteed, but it's one of the ways that we can really change the situation, because, of course, we'd have a protection. But the other 2 things that we would rely on is the therapeutics. If we can cut the link between the fatalities from COVID and just getting the virus, and if it becomes more like normal flu, then I think we'd be in a different place. And obviously testing and the turnaround time, a couple of people have already mentioned it, the turnaround time for the test would be a real game changer. So we've got 3, and I think we should really put our shoulder to the wheel in all of those 3 areas.
Okay, Dominic Raab, astonishing amount of questions you've just answered in the space of an hour. Thank you very much. Really great. We'll be announcing the next one of these very soon. I think we're going to do early in the new year, I believe. So thanks very much for your time. Really do appreciate it.
Great stuff, Paul. Thank you. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Have a good evening. Have a good weekend. Stay safe.
Thank you.